Oh goodness. Good afternoon, y'all. Bobby Joe, Barbara, Miss Caitlin, Pamela. Hi guys, how are y'all doing this afternoon? Chuck Kirking. Hey Miss Barbara. We'll give everybody a minute to jump on here. We've got a whole minute to wait until it's officially 4:32. And then we'll go from there. Hey Miss Julie. Hey to you and Buddy. Hope y'all are doing well. Hey, Lynette. Melaine. Howdy, Chuck. Y'all should be really nervous because when your names pop up here on my Facebook screen, it says, there's a little thing under your name that says, bring them on camera. So if y'all aren't careful, I could push that little button and y'all could join me here. But I won't do that. So, hey, James and Miss Carolyn. Carolyn's watching all the way from Tennessee, I believe. And Lisa. So we're up to 12 viewers, it says. Miss Kay Holt, how are you? It is good to be with y'all this afternoon. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and start with a little prayer and our Bible verse, and then we'll just chat about a few things. So let's pray, and then we'll pray together these words from Isaiah. Okay. I won't put you on camera, Brittany Lee Wright. You are safe. Okay, promise. Hey, Miss Debbie. Let's bow our hearts. Gracious God, we give you thanks for another afternoon, a time when we can come together online, if in no other way. We are just grateful for this chance and grateful for each one of these sweet folks who just keep showing up every week. They are indeed such a blessing. We ask you to bless our time together and let it show your will. And maybe some reassurance too, just much as these words from Isaiah also create reassurance in us. Y'all say this verse with me. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. And that, of course, is Isaiah 43:2. Hi, Gaylan and Miss Mary Pace. I always manage to find all kinds of weird things online. Hi, Miss Agatep. I haven't seen you in forever. I'm glad you're joining us. Anyway, so I ran across this article, and it's all about living through a pandemic, which I think we can all identify with at this point. So some of the things in this article really stuck out to me. It's written, I don't know who it's written by, but she interviews a psychologist and a professor of child development, and this is what the psychologist says. She says, this is an unprecedented disaster that is profound in its impact on our daily lives, but it's different from a hurricane or a tornado where you can look outside and see the damage. The destruction is, for most people, invisible and ongoing. And then she goes on to say how such a disaster, I guess is what she's calling it, such a disaster is really harder for high achievers, for people who are go-getters and like to get stuff done and mark stuff off your list. The more you are accustomed to solving problems, to getting things done, to having a routine, the harder it will be on you, because none of that is possible right now. And she writes, our culture is very solution-oriented, but it's a very destructive way of thinking when you're faced with a problem that has no solution. At least for right now, it has no solution. Hi, Suzette. And I got to thinking about that. I got to thinking how we are all trying to figure out ways to live through this pandemic situation. And some of y'all, I think, are maybe the ones who've been quarantined longer and more closely than some. But But that is hard in a society like ours that values going and doing and being out in the world, not doing and not having a routine and not having those things to rely on. That makes it really hard. And if I'm honest with you, I am totally getting you this week. I started quarantine yesterday. I'm fine. I feel fine. But I was exposed to a known diagnosed case earlier this week, and so I'm in quarantine. So I'm really trying to figure out how to do that. You know, we did it all back in March, and now I'm having to do it again. And so it's something I don't have any control over. It's something I get intellectually, but I'm not really that excited about it as a reality. And so I got to thinking, I was reading this article, and I got to thinking about a friend of mine. And she's that kind of friend who just says really great things, like things you wish you could write down and put on a t-shirt or something, you know. And she was going through a really hard season in life. Her family was. And she told me one time, she said, thanks, Bobby Joe. I'm good. I'm just, trying not to go crazy. But anyway, so she was going through this really hard time with her family. And she told me, she said, for a long time, I thought we were like, and now I just drew a blank, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They're the three guys who were Daniel's friends in the Old Testament, who King Nebuchadnezzar put in a, thanks, Kay. And then he put them in a furnace because they wouldn't bow down and worship King Nebuchadnezzar. And so they said, no, our God's going to save us. We're not worried. You throw us in the fire. And so King Nebuchadnezzar threw him in the fire. And then sure enough, an angel came and saved them from the fire. And so this friend of mine told me, she said, I thought for a long time we were going to be like them and God was going to save us from the fire. And now, she said, I have just decided that we're more like Job, where we have all of these things and all of these hard things are just going to happen to us. And I don't know if you've spent a lot of time in Job, but it's a pretty amazing book of the Bible. And it's longer than you would think. You would think Job wouldn't have to go through quite so much, but he does. Thing after thing after thing happens to that poor guy. And somewhere toward the end of it, he turns from complaining to realizing that there's nothing he can say that's going to change the situation. There's nothing that's going to make it any different. He has to realize, he says in Job chapter 40, verses 4 and 5, he says, I am unworthy, I will say no more. He's complained and he's complained and he's complained, and now he's just at the point where he's like, you know what? I'm just not going to say anything else because you're God and you're here, and that's the real thing. And I think for me, I'm going to have to take on that attitude. And I think we all are a little bit. That God isn't going to come and save us from the furnace. But we can still appreciate that he is God, that he's there, and that he loves us, and that no matter what, he's walking with us through all of this hard, yucky stuff that we're dealing with. The good thing about this article is that it gives us ways to try to cope in the midst of the pandemic. And so I'll share with you the 4 or 5 things that they share here. One of those things is that you have to accept that life is different right now. You have to accept that in your bones, and you have to be okay that it's a tough day, and that's the way it is. And you have to accept that as a baseline. Thank you, Lynette. We really are fine. Like you said, though, the peace part is a little harder in coming. So you have to accept that life is different. You have to expect less from yourself. And that is a hard thing, I think. That's a hard thing for me and probably for y'all, because we're used to doing and going and doing and going. And we have to just expect ourselves to not get as much done and not do it as fast, because we're spending a lot of energy dealing with the stress of all of this, and that is huge, and that doesn't need to be discounted. So we need to expect less of ourselves. We also need to recognize that we're going through a grieving process, that we are grieving losses of different parts of our lives. I mean, some relationships have been totally cut off. Some activities have been cut off. And so you have to accept that you are grieving, that we're all grieving. The next thing they suggest, and I thought this was really great, was to not take on the attitude of a situation being good or bad, but to accept this, that the situation is good and bad. And I think maybe that's kind of what Job was able to do. He was able to say, the situation really stinks, but God is here, and so there's good in it and there's bad in it all at the same time. And so, yes, understand this too shall pass, Chuck, exactly. They compare it in this article, they compare it to Schrodinger's. Have you ever seen Schrodinger's? I think they're usually pictures, but where you look at it one way and it looks like one thing, but you look at it another way and it's another thing. And so I think the pandemic has been a lot like that too. And look for new and old activities that fulfill you, so that you can sort of fill your tank up on those good things for when you are not in such a good place. And then focus on important relationships. I know for me, at least, some relationships have sort of drifted during all of this because I just haven't been able to see some people. But then other relationships, I think, like hanging out with my boys and stuff, those have gotten stronger because it's just happened more. And so you have to focus on those relationships that are important. But I think there's something to be said for realizing that you are more like Job and less like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, that that God is there with all of us, and that sometimes weathering the storms with God can strengthen our faith in a way that his saving us might not. Not that he does that on purpose, but that's just one of the positives that comes out of it. So yeah, Lynette, you're right. Slowing down has been a big part of this pandemic. You're exactly right. I think that's true for everybody. We just can't go do the things that we've done before. So y'all feel free to reach out to me, because I'm not going anywhere for a while. But I will post the link for this article in the comments underneath the video when we're all done. That way, if you want to check out what the article says, you can. I thought it had some pretty good insights. Thanks, Melaine. I am praying that we stay well as well, or at the very least that we remember that we are not weathering this storm alone, and that we have one another online, and that we always have God here with us. So it seems really perfect right now to think about Isaiah's words from so long ago. The flame part especially, I guess, today makes sense. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. But notice he doesn't say we don't get to walk through the fire. We still walk through the fire. We just won't be set ablaze because he's going to be walking with us. I love y'all. I miss y'all. I'm still doing some of my Bible studies from home and answering texts and the like. But yeah, I'm good. So, Rack Shack and Benny, we're lucky. That's so true. Yep, you're exactly right, Brittany. So this is a freebie. Let me just give you this little freebie as my less than faithful close. So when Dixon was in preschool, he had Miss Brigham, who was awesome. He came home one day and he said he learned the story of these 3 guys in the Bible who were thrown into the furnace, but they prayed to God and they got saved. And I was like, really? I was like, what were their names? Just wondering, what he would do to Rack Shack and Benny to Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, because those are hard names. And so I asked him what the names were, and he said, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And so I always think of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego as Huey, Dewey, and Louie because that's just stinking funny, y'all. So that was a fun little reminder. But Rack, Shack, and Benny are the VeggieTales version. They're pretty cool too. So anyway, I'm so glad to be with y'all this afternoon. Thanks for letting me, share, and for your faithful prayers, because I know they are. And so all the laughing faces are popping up now. Somebody will be here next week. It may be me, because I'll probably still be right here next week. But anyway, we're good. Y'all are good, and we know God is with us no matter what. Y'all take care.